Okay then, folks. Hopefully you can see my slide there. Give me a shout if you can't. Welcome to the third of four quarterly CoMTB Cultures of Mountain Biking research seminar series. For those of you that might be new to the seminar series, I think we've had most on the call before, but perhaps for the benefit of those who might be watching this through the medium of the internet or YouTube at some point in the hopefully near future. Cultures of Mountain Biking, or CoMTB as we like to call it, is essentially the first research group of its kind to focus exclusively on why, how and where mountain biking matters to people around the world. We are, by definition, I guess, an interdisciplinary, culturally diverse and global group of researchers, as you'll see from both the scope of the presentations on the right-hand side of the slide there that we've had already and will have in November, and the kind of the remit of the group and the types of things that we look at. We've got researchers from different parts of the world, all corners of the globe, which is fantastic because it's fully representative of the global community of mountain bikers and mountain bike scholars. And we are, like I said, interdisciplinary. So we've got members who have got interests in psychology, sociology, cultural studies, journalism, marketing and coaching, advocacy, of course, as you'll see from Hans's presentation today. So it's a really broad group of scholars, practitioners, policymakers and advocacy professionals who have a global interest in cultures of mountain biking. And of course, one of the methods that we use to engage in thinking about the meaning and the benefits perhaps of mountain bike culture is this seminar series, which is in its second year. We're halfway through the second year now, and I'm pleased to say that it's been really successful so far and well received. Lots of interesting discussions, both in terms of thinking about mountain biking, musing on mountain biking's cultural significance, but also perhaps more importantly, thinking about how we can apply these ideas in practice. Today, we turn our attention to mountain bike advocacy, and we're asking two questions today. First of all, how can mountain bikers spread knowledge and understanding about sustainable outdoor recreation and infrastructure whilst working with cross-disciplinary networks of stakeholders and interest groups, which will predominantly be covered in Hans's presentation. And secondly, how do we, or do we need to create and maybe convey bespoke messages for analogue mountain bikers, but perhaps increasingly electronic mountain bikers who, as you will all know, I'm sure, are becoming more and more highly numbered in various parts of the world, and e-mountain bikes are starting to increase rapidly in popularity. So to answer some of these questions today, we're fortunate enough to have two guests with us on the call. We've got Hans Stoops from the International Mountain Bicycling, I used to say bike, but I now realize it's bicycling association. And Hans is going to be talking to us about IMBA Europe's advocacy work in promoting sustainable trails and strong mountain bike communities. And then we've got Steve Button and Steve Taylor on the call, who are going to be helping us to make sense of how electronic mountain biking might challenge, both in positive and negative ways, perhaps, or ways that might get us questioning what we mean by mountain biking and use of outdoor environments, hegemonic velocipedic, a mouthful, modality in the great outdoors. In terms of structure and format, Hans will go first, if that's okay, presenting for 20 minutes. Then the two Steves, as we'll be calling them from now on, will present. And I'll leave a good amount of time, hopefully 30 to 40 minutes at the end, depending on how long the presentations end up being for discussion. So if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, please leave those until the end of the two presentations. You can also pop them in the chat for future reference. As I mentioned at the start, maybe if you've just joined us as well, the call is being recorded. We upload these to the CoMTB YouTube channel. So please just bear that in mind if you don't want to appear on camera or you're having a bad hair day or whatever it might be. Okay, that's everything from me. Hans, if you would like to share your slides, please.
Yes.
I'm just going to admit the few other people into the group. Oh, hey, Steve. Just spotted you there on the call as well. Steve Button.
All right, you should be seeing my presentation now.
Yes, I can confirm we
Awesome.
can. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Hans. Over to you.
Good. All right. First of all, let me just introduce myself. My name is Hans Dukes. I'm the Advocacy Officer at IMBA Europe. As you can probably hear from my dialect, I was born in the United States. Actually, on the day the first mountain bike was built by Joe Breeze in 1977. But I'm based in Stockholm in Sweden. I've lived in Sweden for over 25 years now, I guess. So yeah, more Swedish than American at this point. Before working at IMBA Europe, I used to do project management at Cykelfrämjandet, where it's the Swedish national cycling advocacy organization, working with mountain biking and bicycle tourism and other forms of recreational cycling primarily. It's a member organization of IMBA Europe, and I'm currently a board member there. I'm also a board member of the Warm Showers Foundation, which is a mutual hospitality organization for touring cyclists, which I'd be happy to inform people of if they're curious about that. And you have my contact information there at the bottom. I'd like to thank Jim for inviting me to present the work that IMBA Europe does in this series. It's been very interesting so far. I've watched the previous ones and have been very inspired. So I have some big shoes to fill, I suppose. And a little bit about IMBA Europe. IMBA in the United States was founded in 1988 to kind of address the needs of a group to represent the interests of mountain bikers in the American wilderness. Frequently, they were being discriminated against in recreational planning and being left out of different nature areas. And IMBA felt the need to address this with a form of an organization. IMBA Europe is kind of affiliated with IMBA in the United States, but we are our own freestanding organization. We were founded in 2012. We're organized a little bit differently. We have over 20 national member organizations across Europe and a number of affiliate members as well, representing regions or smaller geographical areas. We have currently 3 staff members and a very active board, which we're very glad to have. We're a member of ENOS, the European Network of Outdoor Sports, which is where we can kind of collaborate with other players in the outdoor recreational field, hiking organizations, horse riding organizations, and like. We also coordinate work with the cycling industry, especially through our work with Cycling Industries Europe, which is a kind of umbrella organization for cycling industry and trying to represent them in their advocacy work. We have an annual summit, which is kind of our big gathering for members and just the mountain bike community in general. This year will be held in Spain, in Bolpana, in northern Spain, in the Pyrenees, between the 16th and the 18th of September. So I invite everyone here to look into that and join us in Spain if you are interested in what you hear here, and learn more about IMBA and all the work that our members and other people are doing across Europe to promote mountain biking. We do a lot of work with EU projects. Some Erasmus projects that are ongoing right now include DIRT. This is about trail builder training. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. The C project was a project that we could collaborate with other outdoor recreation groups and land managers and those responsible for nature areas to ensure that we could work with communicating the environment and sustainability within sports. And we're currently working with similar kind of stakeholders in the Connect project with kind of similar goals. We do offer a number of different kind of services. We do trail building schools where we can come out and teach about sustainable trail building practices for volunteers or for professionals, any kind of group of people that might be interested in learning about trail building. This is just a very simple kind of workshop, a 2-day introductory workshop, you could say. Rider surveys, there'll be one coming out later this year. There's a lot of resources on our webpage, including the advocacy toolkit, where you can learn more about working with mountain bike advocacy and working with sustainable trails. So I encourage people to go visit the IMBA Europe webpage and look at the resources that we have there if you are curious. Just again, briefly about how IMBA works and how we kind of see the world. We believe that cycling has all kinds of societal and environmental benefits. That more people riding can lead to positive things for the environment and positive things for society. And we believe that the best way to achieve that is to build better recreational infrastructure that will get more people on bikes, which will then continue this virtuous cycle of improving the infrastructure, improving, getting more people riding bikes, and then causing all these kind of positive benefits for society and for the environment. So our entire focus is based on these kind of paired principles of working with people and working with trails to ensure that more people have the opportunity to ride, that there's good accessible trails that meet the needs of the community, and that that we can ensure that the riding that we do benefits the environment. So this is kind of the foundation of everything that IMBA works with. And yeah, so according to that, we have identified some key values in mountain bike culture that we do try to communicate and try to work with in our daily work. Accessible riding for all is really one of those kind of key things. We want to make sure that the benefits that we and other riding enthusiasts get from cycling is something that other people also have access to, regardless of their age or where they might live or their fitness. That this is something that we need to ensure that everyone has access to. So ensuring that everyone can enjoy mountain biking is super important for us. As well as, of course, access to nature. We need to ensure that the current places that people ride aren't taken away from the mountain bike community. That perhaps there are places where people aren't allowed to ride that they certainly could be allowed to ride in the future if we are able to push the right buttons without causing any kind of societal or environmental damage. So ensuring that mountain bike riders have access to great places to ride is of course key to what we do as well. And I think the thing that people probably most associate with IMBA, due to a lot of work that we've been doing since the very founding of the organization in 1988, is sustainable trail building. I think IMBA is today recognized by people all over the world as being kind of leaders in spreading the gospel of sustainable trail building practice. How we can ensure that the trails that we use can accommodate the needs of the people using them without causing undue damage to the environment and sensitive ecosystems. So ensuring that the trails that we ride are sustainable and meet the needs of users is super critical for us, and that's something that IMBA is really famous for. But I'm going to start this presentation with a couple short video clips, if they work. We're going to have to see if Jim's going to have to go in there and share them with us instead. But I was traveling back home to visit my parents on the west coast of the United States early this spring, and the entertainment centers on these long distance flights now are incredible. There's all kinds of things to watch, and I was very pleased to see that there was among the offerings a mountain bike video. This was fantastic. I thought this is an opportunity for you have a captive audience here in the plane. People can learn about mountain biking, maybe be inspired to go riding themselves. So I needed to watch this video and see like how, what is this video saying about the mountain bike community? How is it going to, sell mountain biking to the broader public? And the video is called Anytime. And I did not find the whole thing on YouTube, but I did find a trailer, and I think maybe Jim can share just a brief snippet of that, perhaps. I want you to, while seeing this video, imagine that you're not a mountain biker yourself. Imagine that this is something this is your first introduction to mountain biking, and see how appealing the sport might be. Thank you.
Sorry, Hans, did you say that's enough?
That's enough, yeah.
The sound in my earphones was quite loud then.
Okay, you had the video.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And did people hear what I was saying, or was that drowned out by the music in some way? You heard. Okay, excellent. So as I said, I'm not sure that this is necessarily a great way to sell mountain biking to a new public. And it really brings to mind, to me, the way that that urban cycling was kind of promoted or viewed 15 or 20 years ago. And I have a second video that Jim can share. It's just a brief clip from the series Portlandia, which is a comedy series, but kind of showing public perception about cycling. Maybe the sound isn't working on this one. The sound is more critical for this one, but that's okay. He's blowing his whistle. He's shouting at everybody. He's riding in the city. He's riding on the sidewalks and in between cars, and just making an ass of himself. Okay, that's about enough, I think. So let me go back to the presentation then. Share. All right. So what I think these two videos kind of have in common is that they're showing antisocial behavior. They're kind of exclusionary. They're only activities that are suitable for certain people. They're showing dangerous activities, and they're kind of reflecting privilege. The young people in the videos, the Red Bull video, they're all naturally young, probably affluent. They're traveling to exotic places, flying with helicopters, and so they are kind of showing a certain kind of privilege. And I would argue that both of these types of videos are unappealing to broad categories of potential cyclists. That if we want to, encourage more people to ride in the cities or to ride mountain bikes, videos like this and the way that mountain bike and that cycling is perceived is probably not going to do that. It's not going to be very helpful. And I'd like us to think back, think back 20 years ago, the way that urban mobility or cycling in urban environments was seen 20 years ago. For most people, they probably saw people riding around the cities like this, bike messengers, weaving in and out of cars, perhaps being up on the sidewalk occasionally, riding perhaps dangerously. Arguably, the cyclist probably doesn't think that themselves, but for certainly being perceived by others as a dangerous activity to ride your bike in the city 2 decades ago. But somehow we've been able to transition to an image of urban cycling today. If you ask about, picture people riding bikes in the city today, they're much more likely to imagine this pair riding on segregated bicycle infrastructure. They've got bike share bikes. They look like they might even be electric bikes. They're diverse. They look like they're having a good time. They're not angry. They look like they're much more sympathetic figures, I suppose, as opposed to how urban cycling was perceived 20 years ago. And I wonder, if we could do imagine how mountain biking might make the same journey in the coming 20 years. So imagine the popular perception of mountain biking like this transitioning into something more like this. How can we make that happen? So how do we affect the change to allow more people to experience mountain biking and get the positive benefits of it? And so then I'd like us to look then at how urban cycling and how cycling for mobility was able to kind of make that transition. And we look at these 3 pillars of cycling advocacy that are kind of critical to addressing that: infrastructure, material, that is like the bicycles themselves, among other things, and the culture. And we can identify different things that urban cycling was able to kind of address to within these different pillars, ensuring that there's good bicycle infrastructure, absolutely critical, and especially then, segregated bicycle paths. But beyond that, also good bicycle parking, signage, attractions. I mean, like, picnic benches, or even like repair stands, or things like that can help people along their way. Material, of course, urban bikes are, e-bikes are something that have kind of taken over the urban environment, but you also have bike share, you have leasing options. There have been government programs offering stipends for people to, purchase a bicycle or offset the cost of a bicycle. There's even things like bike kitchens, where people can, build a bike themselves, and different kinds of service opportunities to ensure that people's bikes are in good working order. And working with the culture, working against car normativity, with education, helping adults who maybe never learned how to ride a bike learn how to ride a bike, organizing festivals, ensuring that kids learn how to ride bikes in school, that kind of thing. And some of these things do, of course, cross over. This is a Venn diagram, so there's going to be crossover in some of these categories. And I think that cycling advocacy then kind of fits right smack dab in the middle of this. This is the kind of the point where cycling advocacy works, addressing all of these different questions: the infrastructure, the material, and the culture. And so if we look at mountain bike advocacy, and then try to identify what sorts of things fit into this structure as well, and the things that IMBA is working on. Infrastructure, absolutely critical. We talk so much about trails in IMBA and in the mountain bike community in general. Our trail building schools have been really fundamental in spreading information about sustainable trails. The DIRT project, this is a project that I mentioned before, that we're using to develop trail builder training for both professional and amateur trail builders, and things like the ITRS, the International Trail Rating System, which are being developed to help people better classify trails and help people identify trails that are important for them or that might be better for them. We also work a lot with the culture, campaigns like the Take Care of Your Trails campaign, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Things like the Connect project, where we work with other outdoor recreation groups and with land managers, and initiatives like Outride, which are dealing specifically with mountain biking and ensuring that people have opportunities to ride to address mental health issues. We're a little bit less coordinated working with the material, I'd say. That we do at IMBO work quite a bit with the Cycling Industries Europe, and we have an expert group on mountain biking there. And there are some partnerships that we work with industry to support as well. But I suppose that's perhaps a point that's not quite as strong as it might be in mainstream cycling advocacy. So if we look at mountain biking today, this is a slide I made a couple of years ago, but I think it's relevant to compare mountain biking with other forms of recreation. Paddle is an ascendant form of recreation. It's something that's very popular. There's a growing number of facilities and users. It's quite easy to get engaged with. Compared with mountain biking, about the same number of users within Europe, but it's a shrinking interest after the COVID. And paddle and its kind of American counterpart, pickleball, are something that are directly competing with mountain biking in some cases. Here we had an article where a site was being closed down in favor of a pickleball court. And this other article was shared with me by a colleague who thought it was really interesting about, it was in Italian, about why pickleball should be so ascendant. And the things that were identified in this were that it has a good product market fit. It's easy, it's fun, it's shareable. And the kind of key factors that he identified were that it's accessible. The courts are smaller, so they can be put in different places. It's it's a much lower cost and a much easier form of entry, especially compared to other racket sports. So compared to tennis, it's cheaper to join and it's easier to put in a court. It's social, you do it in groups. Even if you're not in good fitness, it's fun to play, but it still feels sporty. It feels like you're doing something athletic as opposed to just a game, like ping pong or something. And I think when we look at mountain bike, or we look at cycling, recreational cycling, and we kind of think of it as a spectrum, from road cycling to mountain biking, and we put gravel somewhere in the middle, I think that suggests that people do transition from gravel to mountain biking and vice versa. But I wonder if that might not be the best analog. I think if we look at paddle as being a more accessible form of tennis, and we think of gravel biking as being a more accessible form of road cycling, it's more social, it's lower threshold of entry, for example, then I ask, what would be the case for mountain biking? What would be the accessible, low barrier to entry form of mountain biking? And perhaps it's e-bikes. We'll talk more about e-bikes later, I guess. And e-bikes are certainly really hot right now. This was the German sales statistics from last year, where you saw that 95% of mountain bikes sold in Germany last year were e-bikes. But they're still very expensive. This was just the most popular paddle racket and the most popular e-bike on Decathlon's webpage. $2,500 for an e-bike's pretty cheap, but it's still a lot more expensive than a paddle racket, which you can get for only 45 euros. So yeah, it's not even in the same ballpark. So if we look at that diagram before, is e-biking a lower cost form of mountain biking? Not really. Is it more fun to play poorly if you're in poor fitness? Absolutely. That does make a lot of sense. Is it more social? I would argue that perhaps its socialness kind of looks identical to normal mountain biking. Perhaps it's easier for groups to stay together. That could be argued. Does it feel sporty? Perhaps. These I think we can work on, but we certainly need to address that lower cost issue. And so I wonder if maybe just a bike might be an easier access point than specifically an e-bike. But we need to remember that e-bikes are not welcome everywhere. There's currently, especially in the Nordic countries, some considerations that are being made about the place of e-bikes on natural surface trails. IMBA Europe submitted consultation on the proposed new law in Norway last year. In Sweden, they still are not allowed on natural surface trails unless the landowner specifically says that they are. But back to the infrastructure, I'm going to round this up real quickly here. Sustainable trail building, again, this is something that IMBA is really famous for. Our trail building schools have introduced so many people to the principles of sustainability. And one of our most popular campaigns and initiatives that IMBA works with every year is the Take Care of Your Trails campaign, held every May. This was inspired by an initiative in Scotland. It's been running since 2017. It engages grassroots groups, and this year and last year as well, we have had webinar series to improve the knowledge of participants so that they can ensure that they're going out and representing the mountain bike community in a good way, teaching about sustainability, organizing crews, working with authorities, that kind of thing. And we have nice prizes which are supported by industry that we can hand out to certain winners in different categories for the participants in this campaign. So this year, just some brief statistics about the participation this year. We had 184 participants on the webinars. We've had trail building crews in 13 different countries, a total of 62 different crews out there, some of them doing multiple projects on the same site. Total of 1,440 people volunteered, worked on 420 kilometers of trail, and put in 7,650 hours. So very proud of all of our volunteers across Europe. I hope that some people on this call perhaps participated themselves, and we'll be announcing the winners of some of those different prizes later in the year. So thanks everybody for helping to keep your trails clear and getting them ready for the season, and improving the image of mountain biking through trail maintenance. If you'd like to learn more about the DIRT project, you can scan that QR code. I won't say much more about it now. It's in its second phase, where currently we're working on certification criteria for qualified trail builders. So if you'd like to learn more, you can scan that QR code. And again, a final pitch for the IMBA Summit in Spain, September 16th to 18th. It's a beautiful, slightly remote area, but we will be offering shuttle service from Barcelona Airport to ensure that people can easily get there. So yeah, look into that, and yeah, please come and meet us in Spain in September. So thanks again to Jim for inviting me to speak, and I will stop my presentation now, and we can take the questions, I suppose, at the end.
Fabulous. Thank you, Hans. Really good to hear about the work that IMBA are doing. Lots of cutting edge stuff going on there, clearly. It's great to see. And I, for one, can vouch for the quality of the summit, if anybody's interested. I've been before. It's great. There's lots to learn there, lots to do, and some really interesting discussions to be had. So, yeah, give that a go if you can. Thanks, Hans. Okay, over to Steve Taylor and Steve Button, who are going to be telling us all about the latest developments and perhaps controversies in electric mountain biking.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Can you see our presentation?
Yes.
Okay, that's not in presenter mode though, right?
It's not at the minute, no.
Can't actually do that. Oh, that's annoying.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I always struggle with the order. I think you have to share your screen first, Steve, and then put it in presenter mode. Oh, what you've done. Sorry, you've done. Yeah,
I did do. Yeah, it doesn't want to go into presenter mode. That's me clicking presenter mode, and it's not actually doing anything. Okay, I guess maybe that doesn't matter too much.
Try doing the little screen in the bottom right.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not actually doing anything.
Huh.
Nope. Multiple presses, and it's not actually doing anything.
Huh.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess that probably doesn't matter really, because this isn't really about the aesthetics.
Yeah.
Okay. So
your slide's big enough, Steve. It can
okay.
work with that. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Yeah, so. Well, thanks very much, Jim, for the invitation to talk to you this evening. So Steve and I are going to be talking about a paper that was submitted to the Journal of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism. So this is from more academic perspective. So the aim of the paper really was to explore opinions and perceptions about of the landowners and land managers, and also mountain bikers and electric mountain bikers regarding responsible and sustainable use of E-MTBs in the landscapes of Scotland. So in terms of ourselves as presenters, so I am an associate professor at the University of the Highlands and Islands. So I'm based on the west coast of Scotland. Initially, I did my PhD, which was related to mountain biking, and I've been writing academically on mountain biking ever since, in fits and starts, on subjects such as motivation, flow, and trail building. And maybe, Steve, you'd like to say something about the subject of your PhD study at the moment.
Can everybody see me? Or I'll just speak if not. Yeah, I mean, basically, I've been involved in this for about just over 3 years now. So my background prior to that was working in sort of a mix of FEHE. I am from Sheffield. I've talked to Jim about this. Got a very long background in cycling, which has evolved into mountain biking and gravel. I've had an interest in sort of getting more into the research side of things, and Steve kindly said that he'd supervise me. So the project that I've been working on for my PhD is very closely related to this, really. So basically, I've been looking at the sort of recreational conflict, really, but not from a point of view of mountain bikes and e-mountain bikes interacting with the sort of general recreation users, but more intra-conflict. So the research phase that I'm in now really is predominantly getting towards the end of the analysis, and I'm writing quite a lot of that up. I've used a mixed method for that. But it's been very interesting, but the focus has been more on the intra side, so sort of within the mountain biking fraternity, and the emphasis is all about the e-biking and the impact that that has, which as you'll see from a bit of a snapshot with this paper, that it's not all bad, but it's certainly something that has to be studied because it's got implications for the wider management implications and the industry at large. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So we wrote this paper with a master's student called Charlie, and I suppose I introduce a caveat at this stage and say that this was never really intended to be a paper. It was actually master's level research, and so there was a certain lack of robustness, I say, and I don't mean that in any kind of pejorative sense in terms of the methodology. So we had to kind of adapt it really to get it published as a paper. And in terms of our positionality, well, we're all regular MTB riders. We're not really E-MTB riders. And although, I mean, I personally have experience of riding E-MTBs on both short trips and also on multi-day trips as well. So I do kind of understand the perspective of the E-MTB rider. But anyway, so in terms of this paper, right? Okay, so I mean, basically, we all know that since the popularization of MTB about 20 years ago, there's always been this kind of potential conflict between their fast-moving dynamic and I guess the more sedentary pleasure of quiet enjoyment that is often associated with natural spaces in particularly in terms of hiking, for example. And it's also fair to say that E-MTBs have upped this conflict potential not only with other trail user groups, but also with regular mountain bikers. And I think this is perhaps more acute on so-called natural trails, not only rather than kind of, I guess, the purpose-built MTB trails, all those are designed for multi-user groups. And although the academic research into E-MTBs is still fairly limited, scholars are, for example, they're examining things like attitudes, perceptions, riding patterns, motivations. There's obviously scope for us to, to create, to write something that was examining potential conflict issues with other MTB users, and also what the implications might be for sort of more sustainable trail use. And so the key considerations in this study really were given to the growing adoption of E-MTBs, and in Scotland, it has been maybe not to the seismic sort of proportions of the German market that Hans mentioned, but certainly incredible growth in terms of E-MTB sales, and obviously this has a potential impact on trails and also potential impact with other user groups. And so we also were concerned with examining how educating E-MTB riders regarding issues such as minimizing trail impacts or avoiding conflict might take place, and what means might be used to actually to affect this. So from an academic perspective, we used a mixed method approach really. So that was really looking at semi-structured interviews with key stakeholders in our study site, and that was the area of Torridon on the west coast of Scotland. So that's a very sort of remote and rural area. There's no purpose-built mountain bike infrastructure there, but there are quite a few well-known, in the UK at least, MTB trails there. And so that was the primary research method, and we supplemented this by doing an online survey of both E-MTB users and also regular mountain bikers. And so this work was done in late 20, early 2021. We chose our participants using purposive sampling, so we knew exactly who we wanted to talk to. The interviews were conducted on Zoom. Obviously, we were a bit constrained by COVID at that particular time. And the findings then we used to develop the second stage of the research, which was really to undertake this online survey of mountain bikers, and so using convenience sampling for that, and also a little bit of snowball sampling, so getting people to suggest others that we might actually contact. We basically were concerned really with investigating the perspectives of mountain bikers and E-MTB users on different elements of how E-MTB users might be accepted within the wilder areas, so that is on natural trails, and also what the potential issues might be with both regular mountain bikers and also trail users, other trail users. So Steve, I'll hand over to yourself to talk a little bit about the findings, and I guess you can talk a little bit about that, and you'll have to give me a little nod when you want me to run through the slides.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Steve. Yeah, we've just chucked a few slides in here, but basically I'll just give a brief overview of the findings. As I said, the paper was, the data collection was done by Charlie, and that was a mixed method. And obviously, Steve mentioned that the timing of the data collection was, well, a few years ago now. And I think what I've found since I've been doing some of the work on my PhD is looking at comparing it a little bit, is that obviously the Torridon area where this study was done, and Steve will be able to sort of nod on this a bit better than me, but it's a more of a purist wild area for mountain biking, and quite a few of the respondents that were interviewed for the data collection were people riding obviously in that area. So it's maybe it's very indicative of that kind of sort of purist, really, people that are probably considered to be quite hardcore, really. So I mean, this graphic here is just a general age of respondents. And I think when we compare this to other papers that often start with this sort of type of layout, that socio-demographic makeup, it's generally confirmed to be the norm for mountain biking, really. So you've got a dominance of males, 80%, 40% of respondents were 45 to 54. Probably you're on the younger end, Jim, but I think most of us on this call are probably in that area or beyond. So you've got a mean there of 46 years. The respondents, as I just mentioned, being in that sort of riding in that area that they're in, were mostly considered to be quite experienced mountain bikers. Almost 60% of them had been riding for over 15 years. And almost all the respondents did have some exposure. They certainly knew and understood. 26% actually owned an e-mountain bike, and 25% had actually ridden in e-mountain bikes. So that was quite interesting. Respondents were actually asked what they saw as the main advantage of riding an e-mountain bike, and by far the most popular response was, and I think it's a pretty obvious one really, was enabling less fit riders, not just to get into mountain bikes, but actually to get further out, maybe where they wouldn't otherwise been able to reach. And now that this is an area that's come up both in my research but also in other papers, and yeah, it's a great thing, that enabler is a good thing. However, some believe that the inexperience that have this advantage of the e-mountain bike, and it's taken them into areas that might be considered a little bit fragile, maybe disturbing habitats. Other people that have got up to these places maybe understand, you know, it's the sort of special places. So that sort of come out of the sort of background of it, really. Other aspects within the findings. So we just moving on. So based on the survey, one of the aspects that was considered was accessing trails.
Sorry,
So
sorry to
over
interrupt,
80%.
Steve.
You might
Yeah.
want to advance the slide.
Pardon?
Yeah, are these results on the slides there, Steve?
There is some, yeah. So if you just want to move on to, I haven't got them all these results on the slides simply because there's too much detail really within the paper.
My apologies. Yeah, sorry. I thought that's
all.
what the other slides were showing. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's fine. So this particular slide that's up is actually one relating to respondents' beliefs about trail maintenance, which I will come to at some point within this. So this is all about responsible behaviour. Yeah, we're just going back to accessing trails. So over 80% of the respondents believe that e-mountain bikes should have identical access rights to other trail users. Now that's something that's evolving because we are finding that as more e-bikers come into these sensitive areas, there is a big discussion, and even on the managed parks, so people that go and visit places like Glen Tress, they're actually suggesting that they might set up some individual trails for e-mountain bikes. Obviously, those e-mountain bikers' range of abilities are very wide. So you've got some guys that are coming in it fresh, hiring the e-bikes, whizzing around the trails, probably going off-piste, so to speak. Then you've got the experienced guys that are using the e-mountain bikes to do laps, shall we say, which they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So they're sort of getting the thrill out of it, shall we say, rather than having to pedal up to the top and doing the complex sections. So just looking at this graphic that we've got up here, so we've got the landowners, representative bodies, mountain bikers, local regional government, guides. So there were some guides that were interviewed, and then another mix of governmental, non-governmental groups. These all took part in the survey that Charlie ran. And as you can see, that belief about responsibility for trail maintenance, generally speaking, is pretty high, really. I think some of the non-specific groups had maybe a lack of understanding, hence the low percentages there. But overall, that responsibility belief is quite high. Okay, so if you can just pop up the next graphic, Steve. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I briefly mentioned then about the main advantages of riding an e-mountain bike. So these are the topics that got discussed in that dialogue. So I've just mentioned about riding more laps of the trails, enabling, mentions here quite rudimentary, keeping up with other riders, accessing more wild areas, having more energy for descents. I think that fits in more with the lap thing, really, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, enjoying the climbs more. Obviously, you won't have to wear yourself out getting up the climbs. Completing the same routes faster. That's the laps again. Enjoy despite losing fitness. Okay. Losing fitness. Okay, so I suppose that's enabling again. So that's suggesting people that maybe they've lost a bit of fitness, but the e-mountain bikes are still allowing them to enjoy, probably as they're getting older, really. So these overall, the main advantages I think, is that it's an enabler more than anything. Whether that be enabling you to get out or enabling you to focus on the bits of the trail that you want to enjoy. Okay, so if you can just pop down the next survey result there, Steve. Okay. So yeah, what would encourage respondents to adopt responsible trail behaviour? Okay, well, I'll just go back to some of these headings, because we've got quite a lot. There was about 15 different graphs in there. I didn't think it'd be a good idea to plonk them in and bamboozle everybody. But one of the things that came out of the survey was responsibility, obviously, and in educating trail users. So that was highlighted as a key component in reducing trail impact. The participants were questioned on what information they thought should be available and how it should be presented or circulated. Signposting was not a widely appreciated option. One participant actually stated the worst thing would be a load of signs. Well, I suppose it could be classified as littering, so that's fair enough. Most participants agreed that it had to come from multiple sources. One participant felt it had very little to do with the land manager, and I don't think it's my responsibility to promote responsible access because that's across Scotland. Now, obviously, like the countryside code that we have in England, there's a Scottish code, which is pretty much a similar rule of thumb. But a lot of people suggested, when it comes to responsibility and education, that the mountain bike media were seen as being responsible for a large part of the information. One participant suggested that it should be known that Torridon is a difficult place to ride and difficult to move through. So with that in mind, and the fact that it's in quite a particularly fragile area of Scotland, I suppose a bit like the Cairngorms, really, that there needs to be a degree of increased level of responsibility. And I think what they were trying to suggest is that some mountain bike magazines, now I know quite a lot of them have gone off the shelf over the last couple of years, and they're all online now. Now, I'm not sure how that's impacted on the reader numbers, but some have suggested that they are quite irresponsible in a way. And I suppose what it's saying is a little bit like that video that Hans put on. For everybody that's generally out mountain biking, it's about going out into the countryside, enjoying it, getting the exercise, having a bit of adventure. But because it's a really sort of quite a potentially radical and obviously quite a dangerous sport, the magazines and the videos tend to make it perhaps a bit more over extreme than it really is, unless you are somebody that can ride like the guys in the video did, just throwing yourselves off jumps and things. But I haven't got any more graphics on there, but what I will say just briefly is that another element of the findings, and obviously you'd have to read the paper to get everything, was respondents were asked who they thought should be responsible for the execution of path maintenance. Now, bearing in mind, this is actually not trail building as such, but it's trail maintenance, because these areas, particularly Torridon, is going through landowners' estates with permission, so it's not somewhere that you can start digging up and putting berms in and things like that. Majority 70% of the mountain bikers and 83% of the mountain bike users considered that it was the sort of representative bodies like local and regional government that should have the responsibility, and the other 39% thought the landowners should have responsibility. Now, I know there was a bit of an argument between the landowners about access rights. Now, Steve would probably be the one that would know a bit more about this because of the makeup of some of that, how that land's sort of managed in that part of Scotland. But I think if you compare it to what we've got down in England with a local authority forestry commission type land, I think that's predominantly where they were aiming at. But ultimately, what people were wanting to relay was about encouraging responsible behaviour, which is obviously what this graphic says here. So there's a list of different methods and media that were put forward. So the one that comes top, I'm trying to read this now. I think it's the it's the positive information, best trails to ride. I think that's just communicated through general sources. Again, it's a few years out of date, some of this now. So I certainly think some of these adverts and flyers are the thing probably that have gone by the wayside. Most people have probably said social media feeds and relevant, websites that are being updated, blogs, etc. So just to really finish this section off, really. As for what would encourage them as bikers to adopt responsible behaviour, a lot of the output was promotion of positive messages, basically. It came back to that sort of media and how it's reported, and the fact that people didn't think they should be over glamorized. And you're out in the great outdoors. It is an adventurous location, but you've got to be extremely responsible. And there is a place for Red Bull and doing all that kind of riding, but sustainable, responsible behaviours. That's what we want, really. I'll pass you back over to Steve because he'll sort of tie it up a little bit and stop me waffling.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Steve. So basically, the discussion really is in three principal areas. So, I mean, clearly there's a tension between the positive impacts of increased MTB use, E-MTB use, and potential sustainability issues. This was a key thread of interviewee responses to this research. So, increased use was largely viewed from landowners and land managers as being quite positive, really, because they're perceived as being an affluent group of users, and therefore they bring economic benefit to the region. But on the other hand, we all understand that E-MTBs can go further into the wilds. They create issues in new areas, both in terms of potential conflict with other user groups and also environmental degradation. So in terms of these potential impacts of E-MTBs, I mean, this has two components, really. So firstly is creating new problems in areas rarely visited by non-E-MTB users, with potential impact on undisturbed wildlife habitats, for example, and also potentially creating greater wear and tear on routes popular with mountain bikers and other trail users. So we know there's little work done really on whether E-MTB users cause greater wear and tear. I'm aware of the study that was done by IMBA in the US, but I'm not sure how relevant that is to like the weather climates of the west of Scotland. Common sense might suggest they do to a degree create greater wear and tear. I think this may be not just about the additional weight, but also about the speed at which they can be ridden. Therefore requiring harder braking, for example. But on the other hand, more bikes, E-MTBs in more out of the way areas might, to a degree, lessen the impacts on overused trails, spreading the load to an extent. So in terms of maintaining a sustainable bike infrastructure, there was widespread acknowledgement from the interviewers that bikers and E-MTB users, they all have some sort of responsibility here. We know that. This was acknowledged in terms of whether, in terms of their behavior when they come to overused areas, what their behavior might be in those situations. But ultimately, survey respondents in the UK context saw local or regional government as ultimately responsible for maintaining trails. But we all know that this is it's a hot potato. And it's one thing to actually develop trails. In Scotland, we know that many of those have been developed through European Union funding. but the Forestry Commission, for example, as it used to be known, has incredible difficulties in maintaining trails. That's not something that generally gets funding, and so we have this sort of difficult situation whereby trails are funded to be built, but the maintenance in many cases just kind of falls by the wayside. And I know that, as a local biker to this area, we see many trails being shut on either a temporary or permanent basis just because funding cannot be found for the maintenance. The third area really was in terms of encouraging responsible trail behaviour. So, I mean, most interviewers recognised the importance of educating all trail riders, whether they're E-MTB users or regular mountain bikers, when it comes to issues such as minimising trail impacts or indeed avoiding conflict with other trail users. So the influential role of social media was raised, particularly perhaps the use of influencers, and really that was more about engaging people with positive messages rather than dwelling on that kind of ongoing negativity that is often associated with mountain bike use. And then we also found that over 80% of all participants believe that E-MTB riders should have identical right of access to trails in Scotland. In Scotland, we have a very different situation from the rest of the UK, very close to the situation in Scandinavia, where we have kind of allemansretten, so this kind of almost a blanket right to roam situation in Scotland, which is fantastic. And obviously we recognise that is a different situation to much of the world, in fact, probably most of the world. But as well as many people feeling that there were, or in terms of the interview perspectives, they're thinking that E-MTB users and regular mountain bikers should have equal rights of access. In terms of the survey responses, almost a quarter of the mountain bikers, the regular mountain bikers, felt that E-MTB should have few access rights. And this kind of equates maybe with other studies that have been undertaken, such as the work done by Hall et al. In 2019. They reported an element of resistance to E-MTBs from the established mountain biking fraternity. And half a decade later, we feel that increasing exposure to them is lessening the novelty of E-MTBs and perhaps their acceptance both amongst fellow mountain bikers and other dominant trail user groups, hikers in particular, is becoming to the point where they are more accepted. But I think this is pretty much an area for further research. So I'm just going to finish by thinking about, we acknowledge some of the limitations of our research. It was done at the time of COVID, which made things a bit more difficult in terms of both talking to people and also maybe skewing perceptions. If people haven't been on the trails for a couple of years, that they might have a different perspective on these kind of questions. But I'll just finish by praising really how we finished the paper, which was by saying that the sales statistics confirm electric assist, we know, is here to stay. So understandable misconceptions demand further research to understand if these new MTB riders have a role to play in broadening out participation in mountain biking, or do they represent, as Stevens in 2022 puts it, just a bit too much technology in the woods? And I think I'll draw it to a close there. Jim, thanks very much for listening.
Yeah, thanks all.
Magic. Thank you both. That was really enlightening and obviously very topical. So great to hear what the latest research is on that. Thank you. Okay, we've got approximately 20 minutes left for questions. I know I've got quite a few, but I'll open it up to the floor first. Is there anybody on the call who would like to introduce themselves and maybe ask a question? Or shall I kick us off? Okay. If nobody else has a question, I've got one for Hans. My apologies. Oh, no, Steve. Sorry, Steve.
That's okay. No, I was thinking, Hans, then, okay, so obviously, you know, you're American, you've been based in Stockholm for a while. I've ridden, at least in the urban perspective, in a number of Scandinavian countries. I mean, what do you think of the lessons to learn from our Scandinavian brethren? I remember riding in Copenhagen. It was just kind of an amazing experience, really, particularly compared to what I'm used to in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary lesson is that, you know, cycling for mobility, cycling in the city is something that can be done, or can be for people of any age and of any ability, really. But you do need to understand that the city should be built to accommodate that, right? So that you know, a young fit person might feel comfortable riding, you know, among cars in a big city elsewhere in the world, but in Scandinavian countries, by providing, you know, segregated infrastructure for you know, riders, it allows people to be able to experience that who might not be willing to hop out in traffic and ride with them on cars. And so that's a lesson I think we as mountain bikers really should take to heart as well. We're all experienced mountain bikers. We have no problem riding all kinds of terrain and obstacles, but it's very hard for us sometimes, I think, to take ourselves back to that you know, beginner mountain biker and really see things from their perspective. We want more people to, you know, get those positive benefits that you have from mountain biking, both, you know, physical and mental health, appreciation for nature, all these other kind of positive benefits. And we need to enable that by ensuring that there is infrastructure out there that addresses those needs. And the second, you know, factor really, I think that we don't talk enough about is the accessibility of the bikes. The e-bikes might provide a certain kind of accessibility by, you know, allowing people without the fitness perhaps to go and explore certain mountain bike trails to be able to see those things anyways. But there's the cost factor. So we need to think about how else we can provide, you know, accessible bikes to people who are maybe just putting their toes in the water and who aren't really ready to go out and buy a 2,000 pound mountain bike just to give it a go.
Steve number 2 has a question.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, another one for Hans. I'll be very brief. Yeah, obviously it's interesting to hear, Hans, that you've been over in Sweden now 20 years. I just wondered from a sort of comparative, and I know there's obviously quite a huge difference, but from a sort of trail building and sort of community involvement point of view, how does it differ between there and the States, and also what are your thoughts on where things are going? And I mean, we've been working on some joint things over in the States, and we're in things, and you read things, and obviously it's where mountain bikes were born, and the direction seems to be going not necessarily positively over there for access and some other aspects. So so that's two aspects really. One's the differences, and one of the direction of travel in the States compared.
Yeah. I mean, you have to remember, I was a much younger person. And I had a completely different role or different, you know, attitude about mountain bike. I didn't work with mountain bike advocacy back in the States, but and I grew up on the West Coast, which is also, I think, instrumental in that there's wide swaths of public land in the Western United States. You know, most nature is publicly owned, which means that there's one, you know, landowner for trail builders or, you know, enthusiast groups to reach out to talk about building trails. Typically they'll be like the Forest Service, the BLM, and so in a sense it's nationalized. It's a kind of a different kind of socialism perhaps than you might find in other parts of Europe. This is something that's absolutely being threatened at this very moment. There's bills out there to sell off huge chunks of public land in the West, which is very, very worrisome. But it, you know, I think there's also, perhaps because of this, you know, like there is an opportunity to go out into nature, but there's also an opportunity to do things the right way, because you can reach out to the landowner and you can work with them to, you know, create that trail. There's also been traditions of the state like investing in trails and make work projects back in the 1930s, but that's ancient history. But in Sweden, things are a bit different. We have allemansrätten, we have the right of public access. But in order to get permission to build a trail, you have to talk to the patchwork of hundreds or thousands of landowners who might be affected by a trail that you're planning on building, and that's a real difficult ask. And so, typically there's just a trail there. Maybe a deer made it. I don't know, but there's trails in nature. There's not a lot of real investment or thought necessarily that goes into creating these trails. That's a different attitude. That's and it has to do with the land ownership structure and how people perceive nature.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, obviously very different.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. We've got a question from Jai and then from Roddy, please. You're on mute, Jai.
Yeah, I guess first one's a cultural observation from, I'm in the first jurisdiction in the world to introduce helmet laws. We polarized cycling culture in Australia really severely here. And we polarized that into adventure sports and urban cycling. Really went both ways. And what we've seen with the evolution of e-bikes and the consequences for e-mountain biking is that a lot of risk related behaviors was pedal cycling. It was DH related, and as e-bikes have come on, we're seeing the shift of that cohort of young people are now taking up e-bikes on an urban setting. The police are like, hey, we're sick of cracking down on people on two wheels, and so we've got a generation of young people who have bypassed the governor on their Derody or Fat Boys, and they're ripping around doing monos in the streets. So we've got a big moral panic issue in urban cycling, and in the mountain biking scene, it's just gone, it's super peaceful. There's none of that moral panic. We got plenty of land. E-bikes are not seen as the environmental problem because DH is far more, you can't get the adrenaline rush and do the jumps on an e-mountain bike the way you can on a DH bike. So we've seen quite a different split. I guess the question that I have, which is an equity issue, is that to get anybody onto an e-mountain bike is a much bigger financial entry point. And just seeing whether in the Scottish Highlands, I mean, you can see it here, the reasons why it's the old dudes in their 50s who are on the e-mountain bikes is they can buy them. And whether we're getting that sort of facilitation of, hey, I'll share my bike with you, I'll loan it to you, and sort of the entry points, rental or otherwise. So what that sort of the spread of the disease is like.
Okay, well, I think I'll come in here. Well, yeah, I mean, in the UK, I mean, it's a very high entry point into e-mountain biking. That's for sure. And so, I mean, we haven't actually done any research on this, but I mean, our own kind of observations about this is that it is a certain type of user. Certainly, that I've seen cycling in my mountain biking in my own sort of backyard is that. They tend to be older users. They don't tend to be younger users so much. But then the trails that I tend to ride, they're not purpose built as such. They tend to be more natural trails. We don't have a sharing culture as such that I'm aware of. We do have a rental bike systems, but again, the entry point into that is actually pretty high. And I'm sure that kind of excludes quite a number of users. But then my own observations from riding in other places, certainly with purpose-built infrastructure, is that it tends to appeal to quite a young audience in the UK. And so I think it has that kind of perceived attraction in terms of speed and sort of dynamism. And so I think there's a real kind of dichotomy really of users. We have both the older users up here, and I think those who use the more purpose-built infrastructure. There does seem to be quite a preponderance of younger users as well, and it seems to be a little bit more across the board. But we still suffer from the same issue in terms of entry points. I mean, it is incredibly expensive to buy any kind of I guess quality e-mountain bike, and that's just kind of, you know, the purchase cost, never mind the maintenance costs. I mean, I don't know whether, Steve, you found anything any different in England?
No, I mean, obviously, when I've been collecting my data, I did find there were pockets springing up. Because I did talk to some both hirers and some retail outlets, which were often obviously the same outlet. They were suggesting that there was a younger element getting their hands on these things, but I think they were doing it basically by finance, easy access to finance, which is, well, I suppose it's the way of the world, really. But I know, and I've got a couple of friends that have got e-bikes. It's not just buying them; it's maintaining them as well. Because, you know, if you actually ride quite regularly, especially in all weathers, I know one guy that's already on his third motor. Now that's an expensive replacement item. It's not like buying a pair of wheels. You're probably looking at about £800 minimum. So there's probably a business to be made in refurbing motors actually somewhere along the line, which I did mention that to somebody at one point. Yeah, they're hugely expensive. You'll pay £10,000 for a bike, and obviously all the maintenance costs are going to be exponentially higher. So yeah.
Drivetrain wear is also a huge concern, with chains and cassettes being worn out at a much higher rate on e-bikes because of the torque being sent through the motor as well. This is an issue that we also have been talking quite a bit about in the last couple of months, actually, at IMBA Europe as well. That the need for regulation on an EU level to ensure that there's not kind of an arms race among bike manufacturers to, you know, improve spec on power and other kinds of categories, but rather to focus on making the bikes more accessible and ensuring that they do maintain the definition of a bicycle, that they don't exceed that 250 watt norm that is kind of expected of e-bikes in Europe. And, you know, the whole peak power question is something that we do also need to try to put a damper on to ensure that that the bikes themselves continue to be seen as normal bicycles, so that they are not denied access rights in places where bicycles are allowed.
Great. And last but by no means least, sorry guys to interrupt, just very conscious of the time. Also want to allow Roddy, who I don't believe we've met before, to introduce himself and ask his question. Roddy?
Hi, thanks. I've just realised I've still got my work background and I accidentally joined with my work account, so
Okay.
I'll just go here. Yeah, so my question was on level of commitment to trail maintenance, and I wonder if that's something that's been seen would be whether there's any kind of sign of an increased commitment to getting involved with trail associations, with trail maintenance among e-mountain bikers. And I suppose anecdotally, I know a lot of people who, for them, their electric mountain bike is a trail building mule. It's a way of getting up onto the trails and getting more work done to maintain the trails. Thanks.
I think from our perspective that isn't something that we specifically researched. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a a very informed opinion on that as to whether e-mountain bikers are more likely to get engaged with trail maintenance. My feeling is that generally across the board that it's the engagement with trail maintenance or local associations is actually pretty low. and I don't see any particular sort of further interest from E-MTB users in that respect. I mean, I don't know whether anybody else has found anything that, I don't know, supports that or contradicts that.
I can come in on that one, Roddy. I did a piece of research on this last year, and there was a strong theme in that regard. Not necessarily people joining trail associations and being more willing to, put spades in the ground and dig and maintain, but they were much more conscious about the impact they were having on surfaces, landscapes, wildlife, and at least in principle, were keen to try and address that in some way, shape, or form. My research didn't extend to actually finding out if they did that, but there was definitely a sentiment among e-mountain bikers that that's something they should be doing. And there's maybe there's scope there for advocacy groups to try and nourish that and nurture that in some way. One thing I'll just add as well, sorry, just because this is slightly in my wheelhouse, is we talk a lot about finance and money, don't we, here? But I think for many people, the use of their e-bike is priceless, and that's always worth bearing in mind, isn't it? I had a big cohort of disabled e-mountain bike users who saw it as a mobility aid, and if you think about the average cost of a mobility aid, an electric mountain bike is actually quite cheap. I know that our colleagues at Napier, so Tom Campbell and oh gosh, I've forgotten the name now, did some research on this not too long ago, and they also found that surprisingly one of the biggest users of electric mountain bikes were farmers who were using it instead of a quad bike as both a more sustainable and much more efficient way of herding sheep and getting around their land. So yeah, I imagine for those folk, probably not a less, like a cheaper alternative that to other things. So yeah, great question, Roddy. Cheers. Any other questions before we finish? We've got a few minutes left.
It's not a question as such, Jim, but just interesting what you've ended with there, and suggesting about e-mountain bikes being a tool, really, and maybe for some that's the way it's going to go. So, like I say, for herding sheep, and I mean, I know you see police officers on them, things like that. So, yeah, because they are really, let's be honest, they are motorbikes in sort of part sense, aren't they?
Something that's been really interesting for me to think about.
That. Yeah.
During the last couple of years, I reflect back to when I got into mountain biking in the early 90s, and you could buy a specialized stump jumper, say, for less than $1,000. And if you bought a bike like that, you bought a great mountain bike. You could go racing with it on the weekends or just go for fun rides. You could also commute on it. You could put racks on it and go touring with it. You were buying a really multi-purpose tool, right? If you buy a stump jumper today, you're buying a trail bike for 2025, 2026, 2027. That's maybe about it. If you dig that old stump jumper up from the 90s out of your garage, you can still commute on it or do all kinds of things with it today. But if you buy an e-mountain bike, on the other hand, it has slightly more use cases perhaps than your typical trail bike. You could put some racks on it and go ride it to work, put a lamp on it and use it for your commuting. It also makes it easier to ride to the trail. If you have 10 or 15K to your trailhead, riding on your heavy trail bike is not a lot of fun. But if you have an e-bike, it makes it much easier to ride that all the way to the trailhead rather than taking it in a van or in a truck. And so I think that also adds to the utility of the e-bikes that we need to also acknowledge.
And there's an age-old question here, isn't there? To come back to your point there, Roddy, about trail associations and willingness to join them, about short-term and long-term sustainability. So much of the emphasis, understandably, because it's the kind of simple answer to this question, is when we look at e-mountain bikes, let's focus on drive chains, immediate erosion to landscapes, disruption of wildlife and habitats, and that's really important. But I think sometimes what's maybe overlooked are all the things that people are doing with e-mountain bikes that that further their ecological sensibilities, and they become more ecocentric as a result. So, you know, it's not too much of a leap, is it, to suggest that if most people are out in nature more and they're going further, yes, we might suggest they might be more irresponsible, they might go further, they might not know what they're doing. But if we're to give people credit, and maybe these people have agency and intellect, like, let's maybe kind of also assume that they're learning more about nature, they're being exposed to it more readily and more frequently. They're learning more, they're understanding the world around them a lot better. And perhaps a big part of that is therefore how to protect it. So I think, yeah, for me, my big bugbear with this debate is we always focus on those understandably important things, but there is always a bigger picture there, isn't there, that needs to be considered as well. Great. Well,
yeah, I'd add
sorry,
to
Jay.
that, Jim, the sort of the ecological awareness there. You know, like the demographic that it's picking up is, you know, there's a lot of people that are going to get on e-mountain bikes that would otherwise be on motorised trail bikes. You don't need to get registration. You know, state forests and national parks here will chase you around if you're on a moto, if you don't have your registration, but you can get out on an e-bike. I see a real good potential there. I mean, yeah, massive mobility aid. I'm a adaptive user myself, and so it's been really beneficial. But the aspect I do see is, yeah, that entry point's really, really tricky. I've spoken with retailers here, and they say the NDIS, which is our nationalised disability support scheme, they're supporting a lot of e-bike purchases. I don't know if they've done a split in what percentage of that is e-mountain bike, but I'd certainly know that dual suspension would be pretty handy for a lot of joint problems. So yeah, there's certainly awareness here, and yeah, government support in that way too. I don't know about any Europeans with your nationalised medical schemes where the people are helping out, where the governments are helping out with e-bike purchases.
Yeah,
no, sorry, it's just cycle to work scheme, obviously, but people take advantage of it for that, I think that's very beneficial, because it gets all people out of cars and getting them to actively commute. So, but not sure about the medical side.
Roddy, did you have? Sorry, Jay. You said it was the cycle to work scheme, Jay. They just not until not too long ago it was limited to £1,000, wasn't it? British folk on the call, but then I think it was maybe last year or the year before, actually upped it to an unspecified amount. I don't know, but it's a lot more than it was, allowing people to spend it on is it 4,000 now?
I think it varies depending on the workplace.
Right.
I think the workplace sets the limit.
Yeah. Did you have your hand up again, Roddy?
I did. I've got a whole load of thoughts and questions, but I'm conscious of time, so I'll maybe just use the time to just put something out there, which is something I've just been wondering about. I've not been able to find an answer to, so maybe having some academics in the room might be a good opportunity. And on the ecological impacts, I think certainly in the UK, and particularly in Scotland, I believe, and possibly something that's felt in other parts of the world is the fact that Scotland lacks any apex predators, which causes any saplings to get munched. So we have this barren landscape. Which, if it wasn't for that grazing pressure and some other issues, would actually be forested land and more biodiverse. And I've often wondered, does the presence of bikes and other trail users and e-bikes have a particular niche in that ecosystem, so to speak? Would that and could that affect deer browsing behaviour, things like that, sort of scaring deer off? That type of thing. Sorry, that's a little bit off the wall and maybe a bit off topic, but that's probably my most burning thought at this point. There's maybe a few more kind of relevant to the discussion, but I'll just leave that.
Okay, well, I'm trying to think. I'm not aware of any studies that have specifically targeted this particular issue. I must admit, in terms of e-bikes versus other trail users, I mean, that's something I'd really have to I'd have to dig into. I think all we have really at the moment is kind of anecdotal evidence about the fact that e-mountain bikers might be able to go further into the wild areas, and therefore they might be disturbing new habitats. But I'm not aware of any research that's been done to either support this or refute this. I'd have to look into that. I'd have to look into that. You kind of put me on the spot, really. It's not really my area of research. But yeah, if you want to put your email into the chat, I can dig into that and have a look. I'll send you any relevant research that I can find.
Cool, thanks. Sorry, I know it was a bit off the wall, but it's been on my mind.
Pondering a project in apex predators as mountain bike limitation around the world. We've got a few.
It could be a joint Swedish Scottish project, Steve. Another trip.
Well, I have been involved in some work in Norway, which has looked at this particular issue. But I mean, that was really just a troll of the literature. But I mean, I'm happy to share that with people if it's of any interest. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's worth being honest, Roddy, about the remit of this group, and we are, for better or for worse, predominantly a group of scholars that sit within the humanities and the social sciences, rather than kind of the sciences or geology or ecology, so to speak. So I am aware there was a paper last year published, as Steve mentioned, around the impact of people going further and faster on natural landscapes, which I'm happy to send you. I know I've just seen your email in the chat there, so I could pop that over. But yeah, I don't think there's been any. I agree with Steve. I don't think there's been any specific targeted research on particular species of animals or wildlife just yet. So yeah, maybe there's room for that in the future. So guys, I'm going to wrap up because I'm very conscious that we're now almost 10 minutes over what I said we would be. Again, I'd just like to thank Hans and Steve Taylor and Steve Button for contributing to this excellent session. I'm sure you'll agree it's been a really interesting and insightful discussion around electric mountain bikes and advocacy and how we move that forward, because of course they're not issues that we can separate. Some really interesting questions. Thanks to everyone in the audience. Great to see some new faces here. Roddy, Gerald, Robin, Tavish, you're one of us, aren't you? So yeah, great to see some new faces, and I hope to see the same faces in the future sessions. We've got one more session this year on the 20th of November. Same time, online. Obviously, everyone's more than welcome to join. That session will be on the topic of mountain biking and some of the controversies that it causes in a part of Eastern Europe called the Black Triangle. From memory, I think Mark is going to be talking about how there was an area that was previously very kind of socialist politically. Mountain biking has entered into that world, and there are kind of there's lots of room for hope and optimism because of that, and that there are also some controversies that come with that unique part of the world. So make sure to join us for that. Worth mentioning as well, please, everybody on the call, that I am after another presenter for that final session of the year. So if you or anybody else has anything that you feel like may be of interest to the group and you'd like to present, then it would be really good to hear from you. But that's everything from me. Thank you everyone again, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.
Yep. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.